Am I just jumping in here? Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Kristen and Nathan, for having me. I'll be talking about my work, A Study in Rhyme and Song, which I showed at Mom and Susan Gallery, and it was a project I started off developing as my graduate project from SAIC. The work was created in response to a few things, um, partially from critiques received at school from the work that I was creating, and also the climate within the city and within the nation during that time. And it was 2015, 2016. So there was a lot of protests happening and a lot of work with the Black Lives Matters movement that was happening nationally and locally as well. And I was also thinking about these themes of social terrorism through other projects that I was working on, looking at public space, also looking at children's culture, and thinking about how um, those two things converge in the experiences that happen in public spaces, and a lot of acts of terror that happen in public space, and often looking at groups that are marginalized, that are subjects of these sorts of happenings, including youth and children being marginalized groups. So the work kind of developed out of that, all of those notions, and also um, we're thinking a lot about the prison, school to prison pipeline, and experiences that I've had with family, also with friends, and growing up in Chicago, in the urban landscape, and seeing the impact of the prison industrial complex on young people was also a factor in developing this work. And so, with a study in rhyme and song, also I was looking at minstrelsy, and thinking through performance of identity, um, and identity identities that I created in response to social terrorism, like the performance of hypermasculinity in public space. So, with that, all those things I was researching, I decided to look at children's songs as a source of inspiration, and I began to do more research on the origins of some of the songs. And I think it's pretty common knowledge now that a lot of children's rhymes were also um, minstrel show tunes or adaptations of minstrel show tunes. So I decided to focus on a song that pretty much everybody knows worldwide, and that was 10 Little Indians. And it's a song that has been used to teach English as a second language, or to teach other languages like Spanish as a second language. And so it's a song that my grandmother knows, my mother knows, my father knows, I know, my siblings knows, and the younger generations of kids know in my family. So I decided that this would be um, the best song that could reach pretty much all ages and multiple cultures, um, and really kind of showing the genealogy of the idea behind the song. And so um, the original lyrics to, or the original title of 10 Little Indians was 10 Little Nigger Boys. And then there was also an adaptation called 10 Little Injuns, which was a derogatory term that was used towards Native Americans. I'm going to share my screen to show the lyrics. So let's see here. Can you guys see that? Okay. So these are the lyrics. As you can see, 10 Little Engines is right here. That's what it was called in 1868. Um, these are the original lyrics that basically count down the death of 10 children until there are none. And there are all these different types of violent acts or accidents um, within the lyrics. And so I pulled from these lyrics from the late 1800s to thinking about, excuse me, of what was happening socially at the time when I was developing this project and looking at uh, police violence and the killings of young people. And so with that, I decided to work collaboratively with a group of artists from ages 14 to 35, I want to say, um, to develop a choreography to a soundscape that I created that included clips of the children's rhymes, music covers of the song, like that were made famous by like the Beach Boys, um, and also videos that I pulled off of YouTube that had different like people singing it from all over, from the Caribbean to the UK. So there's like little snippets of that in there, and then there's also snippets from movies. Like there were movies, several versions of Ten Little Indians, and eventually that movie became what we know as the movie Clue, which is a movie I grew up with and loved and had no idea it was even connected to this song until during this research. Um, and I'll play this one first. So I'll talk a little bit over this while this still kind of forms. This version of the performance was done at Mana Contemporary through a residency there, with half of the crew from the original performance. These videos of the
Sadie,
yes.
your video is a lot louder than your mic, so you might want to turn
Oh,
the video down a little bit.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? It's better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. These small player record players, toy record players, I created custom toy records for them that were these edits of 10 Little Indians. So it's deconstructed but with the same notation. Um, and I'll talk a little bit more about this process after the video so you guys can see the performance.
Now, let's say the numbers backwards. You will enjoy it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A 10 and a 9 and an 8 and a 7 and a 6 and a 5 and a 4 and a 3 and a 2 and a 1 and a none little nigger boys.
Ladies and gentlemen,
10 little Indians.
You are cordially invited to cocktail and murder. Where are they coming from? Have you anything to say? Try to guess who is determined to murder 10 people. You may need this. One by one by one by one. Now, you play detective.
Happened to the 10
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host speaking. I brought you here to charge you with the following crimes.
I saw and I conquered a nation.
Then there were none.
I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again. I got to hear it again.
I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again.
Oh, I want to hear it again. 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 I want to hear it again.
So that was a short snippet of the original performance, which was performed for 90 minutes to 2 hours at a time, which you can imagine was very, uh, it became quite an experience because the performers were interacting with live crowds, so the crowd was being implicated within the performances, and they weren't able to just be spectators, but actually brought into the performance, and having to engage with them throughout these different movements in the piece. And it toured the city for a year and a half. And then I ended up doing my last performance at Roman Susan Gallery with the exhibition in 2017. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And I just want to share this short video. This is just a snippet of the toy breaker players. And I had been collecting these. I had these, first of all, as a child. So I always kind of had an affinity for them and really loved them. And I figured out how to hack them by making these custom records. And so I kind of, I had a lot of fun in that process. And this is actually where the project started. So this was the very first piece, and then everything else came after that. So there was the toy records, then the audio, soundscape, then the performance, and then some prints that came after that. And then from here, I just want to share some of the archival material that I pulled off of the internet throughout the process of developing the exhibition for Roman Susan. I actually um, began collecting material off the internet and actually buying some objects as well, including toys and slides, books, uh, program pamphlets, all kinds of things that were from this the time era, the early 1900s to the 60s and 70s that um, created like an archive to contextualize this work. So this is let's see. This is a slide from these glass slides that were actually circulated in museums that had there's like 8 of them, and they had the story of the children's book that was projected in museums, and this is one of the slides from that. This is sheet music, because there's actual sheet music that was distributed for performances, not only in minstrel shows but also in theater as well. And this is just one of the many that were printed. This is an actual toy game that was also distributed, where they had images of 5 black children, and you would shoot them down. So I was looking at this and thinking about it in the context of police brutality and children being targets of violence. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my choice of medium and music boxes. The inspiration comes from the technology of player pianos, which I'll touch on later, because I'll show some of the work that I've been developing with music boxes beyond the toy record players. But the toy record players are actual music boxes. They have the same mechanism. So I was also looking at that technology while developing this work. This is just a collection of images to kind of show how far and wide this one singular thought has gone, from uh, children's books to actual fiction books. Like Agatha Christie had multiple versions of this book, to film, cartoons, animation. There were also postcards, and with this song, you'd have postcards of children where you'd see them experiencing these violent acts, to more cartoonish like entertainment images throughout the years. Um, and so when I was doing this research for the project, I was pulling from all these sources to really inform the work and installing the work and all of those things for the exhibition. Um, are there any questions so far?
I don't see any in the chat. If you want to keep going, we could round with questions.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are just a few images over time. This is from the first performance for my grad project. When I showed it, it wasn't necessarily an exhibition, but more a time-based work. And so I had images projected as opposed to installed. And then I had the performers activate the music boxes to add an extra layer of sound um, to the choreography. So you had this acoustic element, electronic element, and then the physical activity of performance. And there were also costume changes. So you see here, there's masks as well. There was masks, there was face painting, there were also lasers. So like in the video, when you see the performers motioning to have a gun, there were actual lasers that they had in the performance that were pointed towards the audience to kind of um, to recreate some of the scenarios that have been experienced with young people and the police. And with this group, I also like to say exploring the act of performing hypermasculinity was pushed with a variety of identities. So you have um, cis hetero identity, you have queer identity, you have trans also within this group. So there, we're also playing with the idea of legibility and also marcation within the social context. And these are a few photos from the installation. I'll go slowly. Go back to the beginning. Okay. So this was a window installation. I had some cowboys and Indian statues. I'm sure that you all have probably seen these at some point. But the game of cowboys and Indians are also based off of the song 10 Little Indians, 10 Little Nigger Boys. This here are plush toys that I recreated from stencils that were actually distributed in the 60s for kids to make teepees and Indian dolls to play with that were numbered 1 through 10. There were also toys like this here that was used to teach counting, and you still have to do the act of disappearing the figure. So these all flip over. They have small figures on there. You have to flip them over and disappear them to see the numbers. So it still had the same psychology behind the toys. And the same with these here. These are just stills of the record players that were able to play, fully functioning. Here you can't see it as much, but this is some of the archive of things that I collected, like sheet music, theater programs, and museum sites were exhibited here. And then the video is playing here with sound in the gallery. And this here is actually one of my childhood records that I really loved. I really thought I was doing something at school during show and tell when I was able to bring a record, and 10 Little Indians was on that record, and I used to love playing it as a kid. So I wanted to include stuff from my own experience within this while I was um, examining these concepts within the song and lyric material. Okay. So I'm going to jump a little bit ahead on what I've been doing since then. So, or looking at the through lines of some of the work. So I continue to work on music boxes. These are a series called Service in This Bitch, and it's from a song that I wrote based off of experiencing poor customer service in the service industry. Um, and it's basically a critique on hospitality. I also worked in hospitality for quite a long time, so um, it was a song basically talking about discrimination in service. And these, I can actually show you one of these. It's a handheld music box. So when I was making this, I tested it out on kids in my family and also on adults to kind of figure out like what size would work for a variety of hand sizes. And this is pretty much the size is 4.5 by 5 inches. And then I made sheet music for that. So these holes are actual notations. And they work the same as the records. So the records with the toy record players have these small indications that trigger the tines and the hand crank, and the paper holes. The holes in the paper do the same thing here. So I'm gonna play this so you can hear what it sounds like. So that's obviously just the melody, it's not the words, but but I use this to have sound for the sound aspects for different performances and also for film that use the song. Um, and it's also an object, that you can have in your home. Um, and it sounds nice. Um, but the lyrics are a bit more, maybe a little bit more jarring, but I haven't officially released those. So one day those will be out in the world. But that is one music box that I continue to make. And then I also did larger versions of that, um, larger versions of music boxes, but with different songs. And so with this series, Soothsayer, I was looking at protest music and thinking about um, the songs that are actually on music boxes and what's been distributed throughout the years, and wanting to have other songs that are more culturally specific. So I started looking at protest songs within my own research of protest music. As a DJ, is something that I also um, like to play and use as a form of storytelling for historical events. So I was pulling from my DJ practice while doing this work as well, and I chose to adapt "Dancing in the Streets" as a song. Once again, because everybody knows that song, but it has a very interesting history. So Motown was, really big in the 60s, and there's also a lot of social movements happening, but they didn't want to have any association with the Black Power movement or the Black arts movement, and they were really built around respectability politics. So there was a lot of friction between, you know, people in the movement and artists and executives at Motown. But you have someone like Rap H. Brown from the Black Panther Party that will play Dancing in the Streets under scoring his public speeches during protests. So the song kind of gained popularity because of that as a result. And so at a certain point, Motown wasn't able to really deny um, what was happening at the time, and eventually Motown developed a sister label that was called Black Forum, and they released a series of records um, that were more political. So they had a release with Martin Luther King. They also had a vinyl that recorded Black soldiers that just got home from the Vietnam War, recounting some of their experiences. um, they also had a release from, I want to say, Stokely Carmichael, from the Black Panther Party. So it was just interesting to see that happen after a series of events, and also with the association of Dancing in the Streets with the Black Panther Party. So I chose that um, as a song to adapt for this series. And I don't know if any of you have seen the player piano before, what it looks like or how it works, but I just wanted to share this because I really love them. I had one for a few years, and it has been a big source of inspiration for the work that I've been So that's what it looks like. And yeah. And also the ice cream song, I don't know if you guys know that it was also a minstrel show too. So I was thinking about these ideas of music boxes and the songs that are played in public spaces and reenact um, or reinvoke like these histories, but people may not know them or understand them, but still carrying the same kind of sentiment that creates these acts of social terrorism in public space. So okay. So with that, my most recent projects I'm going to talk about are It Was a Rebellion and A Party as Protest. And so, what I have been doing is pushing more my DJ practice and creating mixtapes and really looking at the aesthetic of mixtapes and the distribution of music um, that I've experienced within in my community growing up here in Chicago has been underground, and then how a lot of music was sometimes broken publicly, and also how a lot of artists became famous through these different channels of mixtape distributions. And so what I did was create this project. It was a rebellion. Initially, it was created as a site-specific performance for the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination and the 1968 riots that happened on Chicago's West Side. And so when I developed this work, I partnered with Radius, which is a pirate radio broadcast, and we set up shop on the West Side in Homan Square and performed. I performed this piece just across the street from a police black site, which is a site where people have been tortured and disappeared over many years in the Homan Square, which is a predominantly black neighborhood, and also the neighborhood where riots took place after King's assassination in '68. So I performed this piece there and continued to develop it and show it in different spaces. There's a lot of inquiry to show the work in gallery spaces. Um, which is always awesome in in museum settings as well. But I felt that there was um, some disconnect because the communities that the work was made for, it wasn't reaching. And so my last show that I had with this was actually at Weinberg Newton Gallery, which is one of my favorite galleries as well, that does a lot of civically engaged work. And so the exhibition opened right before COVID hit and everything shut down. So there was like the opening, and then that was it, and there wasn't any programming and people couldn't go to the gallery. So um I decided to release the work publicly because just months after that was the social uprisings as a result of the um killings of Breonna Taylor and Floyd, and so George Floyd. And so I released the mixtape on Juneteenth Eve, right before the National Black Holiday, um, and put out a press release, put out all the versions of it. There's a clean version, an unedited version, uncensored version, and then also a house music version, um, along with um, a statement of the project, the full track list, so people could understand like the music that I included and why I was included, to help kind of frame the story around the rebellion, and then also an original artwork which I can show you guys here. And then this work, it's a collage, and I pulled from the March on Washington, that pretty much shows that we're having similar conversations now in this moment, and a lot of things have not changed over the last 50 years. This down here is part of the North Lawndale area that was on fire during the riots, and this is an image of King that was taken in his home library, a very candid shot, and I really like this image of him because of the gesture, and also because it's not as sanitized as an image that we're constantly being shown year after year. Um, and it to me kind of taps into more of who King was, which at the time was radical person, and also one of the most hated persons in America, and seen as one of the most dangerous people. Um, as well. And so I just wanted to really remember him more in the elements of who he was versus, what we're taught at school and taught on TV and taught in the media. So That's that. The other project I released last year was Party as Protest. And so I had been working with Aram Han Cifuentes, which is a local artist here in Chicago, on soundtracking her project, The Official Unofficial Voting Station, which was created to reimagine the voting process for marginalized communities, including immigrants and also formerly incarcerated or incarcerated individuals, and also youth, um, basically anyone who legally can't vote. And so the first release that I did was in 2016, and the playlist included music from around the world that had to do with voting and civil rights, and also speeches on legislation, and also political speeches um, that revolve around these sorts of rights. And this last year, which is 2020, I put out a mixtape that featured all Chicago artists, to bring it more regional based. Um, the artists featured on there were all either folks that live here, who have lived here, and have used music as a form of social mobilization. So you still have this context of civil rights within these songs here. So I'll show you the artwork. It was a collaborative project, so the artwork was by Ishita, who is also a longtime collaborator with Aram. She made the artwork, which I really love. And these are just really nice vinyl pictures, so I just want to show that. Um, let's see. This is also available. Both of these are available for download online for free. They're also on my website if anyone is interested. It's under my DJ stuff. So you have the links here, and all of these have an accompanying Spotify playlist. So you can also, if you want to, if you're on Spotify, you want a playlist, it's there. Okay. Shall we open it for questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sadie. Sadie does have to go teach at 6, so our Q&A is going to be super brief. So anyone who would like to, please, by all means, jump in right now, or Kristen and I might ask Sadie a quick question to start it if no one is ready to unmute themselves. So one of the things I really value about your work is how you explore and share narrative through the different ways you are working, DJing, curating, making objects, all those things. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your approach to storytelling, especially with these like layered historical sources that you're drawing from and bringing attention to.
Yeah, I would say a lot of that has been influenced too by my DJ practice, and have collected music. I collect materials in the same kind of way. Um, and I tend to really blur the lines of time periods within my work, but looking for the through line of what the commonalities are as far as like what people are saying, what the feelings and sentiments are. And so um, like with a study in rhyme and song, I pulled part of that is personal experience. But I think it makes it easier to tell the stories when you're not so close to the subject. You know, it's a little less painful, but you know, a lot of the inspiration from that came from experiences that my brother has had, and that I've had to be witness to growing up and being a young adult, and also folks that I've known, like, you know, friends or you know, um, partners, um, in high school or in college, that I've seen that have fallen off or disappeared because they had some kind of, situations going on or were incarcerated, things like that. And so um, it was something I was working through in grad school because of critiques that I was receiving about how I was not creating Black arts. And, as a Black person, in my mind, I'm making Black art no matter what the fuck I'm doing. That's what it is. It doesn't have to be these things, these sorts of tropes. But I really was like, okay, what is this constant push for production from Black artists to create Black art in this moment? And I was looking at the performance of identity and really the expectations of what people think that should be in that time period. So I put that out there. Like, we're constantly dealing with having to produce under these circumstances and constantly being bogged down by the social injustice or looking at these violent images constantly and not really considering like how that is impacting people that have actually lived through those experiences, and why we have to constantly be publicly processing those things. So that was the sentiment behind the studying rhyme and song, and I think it resonated with people a lot based off of the responses that I got from that work. And eventually I decided to stop doing that work because it became difficult for the performers to keep performing those things as well, because there are some of those people that live through those experiences, and is asking them to constantly perform them over and over again was a lot in the process. So um yeah.
Yeah, I think that the experience of your work and the sort of like confrontation that you're expecting between the performers and the audience, and the sort of I mean, all of the deep associations with childhood and this kind of like insidious recycling of these tropes and the racism and the way like all of these things like being kind of like confronted with and realized makes me wonder what you think kind of like the ideal venue is for you, like the ideal stage for your work. And if yeah.
I mean, that's a good question. I I really didn't think that anybody, I don't know, I didn't have any expectations for the response that I got, but when I started getting feedback, it was like, oh, this is important. It was kind of cathartic and a good way to release in some ways, but it was also um for me after a certain point of time for me to reel it back in, because it was becoming like it was just a lot. It's like constantly asking someone to address their trauma over and over again and then it becomes at a certain point entertainment, right? So like kind of like looking at the same kind of things that are happening on social media with these recycling of information or sharing these violent videos or images or text around these sorts of things. So I was with this work, I mean, shown it at the Art Institute. I showed it with 6018 North, um, at the outside on the beach. I showed it in a dance festival. Like who would think that? Who would want to see that at a dance festival? I'm pretty sure the people that came to the dance festival were not expecting to see what they saw. But I did insert it in a dance festival. Um, and then there were also gallery performances, right? Like also Roman Susan, and I also did it at Tiger Strikes Asteroid. Um, so each place was a little bit different. Um, and there wasn't always an audience of color present, but when there were also these very like sometimes visceral responses or really um, uh, poignant responses too. So I felt like it hit everybody in a different kind of way, but what really I think made the piece work was because everybody knew the song, but not everybody knew what the history was. And then really connecting the dots with thinking about like these forms of racialized entertainment and how it impacts um, social dynamics, right? And then also how it reinforces these kind of like stereotypes of performed identities, and how it creates these kind of hostile environments, right? Or internalized like self-hate, things like that.
Thank you so much. It is 5:57, which is very close to the time we agreed to alert you that you've got to go do something else. So thank you so much for sharing this project with us again and looking back at it together. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. We will put a recording up if you want to revisit anything you saw or share it with other people. I'm going to drop in the chat the long list of future artist talks we are about to do. We're doing one a week with different folks. And
yeah, it's been a real honor to get this in the archive, a story of your story. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is cool. I actually really haven't been able to share that a lot of the backstory in that project, so I appreciate it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sadie.
Yes.
Have a good class.
Yeah, have a good night, everyone.